Ever heard of a community that's been around for like thousands of years? I mean, way before empires we all know, like Rome.
Oh, absolutely. Groups with roots going back further than you'd imagine.
Right. Today, we're doing a deep dive into one of those, the Samaritans.
A fascinating story they've got, for sure.
To really get this right, we dug into travelers' tales, those old accounts.
Yeah, plus their own writings, religious stuff mostly.
Uh-huh. And of course, what scholars have figured out over time. It's amazing what they've pieced together.
Lots of debate still, but the main picture is getting clearer.
So our mission, if you will, is to uncover their story, like where they come from, how they've stuck around so long.
Especially that relationship with Judaism, sometimes friendly, sometimes not.
Right, that's key. And what their survival against all odds tells us about, well, about people and faith and all that.
How belief shapes history, for sure.
Okay, so starting point origins. Where do Samaritans come from, geographically speaking?
So their heartland is Samaria, specifically around Shechem. Ancient name for it was Mount Ephraim, or the highland of Ephraim. Really strategically important.
Strategic. In what way?
Well, imagine trade routes, the major ones in ancient Israel. North-south, all passing through there. Crossroads, basically.
Ah, so controlling that spot meant controlling a lot of movement.
Exactly. And that geography plays right into a big event, the split of the Israelite kingdom, right?
Northern Kingdom of Israel, Southern Kingdom of Judah, way back when.
Yep. Centuries before the Common Era, even. Two entities, separate paths. Then, bam, 8th century BCE, Assyrians come knocking.
Those guys were known for not messing around.
Conquering and deporting. It's in the Hebrew Bible, too. 2 kings. Pretty vivid stuff. The Assyrian king uproots loads of Israelites.
Okay, but that leads to the big question, right? Who are Samaritans descended from?
Is it just those exiled folks? Well, not quite. Assyrians did deport tons, like King Sargon II bragged about 27,000 plus from Samaria alone.
But not everyone.
Nope, many native Israelites stayed put. So already we've got this mix, and that early political division. That echoes for centuries. Religiously, culturally, like how events shape who we think we are, way down the line.
Fascinating. So some stayed. What about those who weren't kicked out? What happened to them?
It gets more interesting. So you've got Israelites who remained,
Yeah.
right? But Assyrians also brought in people from their other conquests to fill the gaps.
Ah, resettlement, mixing things up.
Exactly. These newcomers, at first they had their own gods, their own ways. But over time, things shifted.
How so?
The Israelite traditions that were already there, those had an influence. Plus, stuff happening down south in Judah, that also played a role. A blending, you could say.
And out of this blend comes a distinct Samaritan identity.
Starting to form, yeah. And their religious text, that's where it's really noticeable, like the Samaritan Pentateuch.
Pentateuch meaning.
First 5 books of the Bible, basically.
Now, it shares the basic stories with the Jewish version, but there are key differences.
Big one is Mount Gerizim.
Yeah.
Samaritans say that's the holy place, chosen by God, not Jerusalem. Their Deuteronomy, chapter 27, verse 4, even reflects that.
Wow. So a different mountain, huge difference in belief.
Massive. Becomes foundational to who they are and a source of friction with Judea, ongoing.
Makes sense. Even way later, folks like Sir John Mandeville, that traveler, he knew about them, the Samaritan.
Oh yeah, they were on the map, so to speak. Though getting their actual writings, that was tough for outsiders back then.
Secret knowledge kind of thing.
More like guarded, maybe. It took time, scholarly exchange, for Westerners to get a real peek into their thinking, especially for later periods. Those first-hand sources are gold.
Let's jump ahead to the Persians. Jews are back from exile in Babylon, and I bet things got interesting between them and folks in Samaria.
Oh, you bet. Book of Ezra lays it out right. Returning Jews want to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, big project. Samaritans come up and say, hey, we worship the same God, been doing sacrifices since Esarhaddon, let's work together.
Sounds reasonable, right?
Except, it's not what happens. Zerubbabel and the Jewish leaders, they flat out refuse.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's not just logistics, it's a statement. You're different, we're different, end of story. Plus, figures like Sanballat emerge. He's a big deal in Samaria, possibly pushing for their own thing entirely. And around this time, bam, a Samaritan sanctuary, likely at Shechem, solidifies.
So this is where the real separation happens.
Seeds are sown, yeah. But the definitive break, most scholars agree, that's 2nd century BCE.
Why then?
Scripture, mainly. Samaritans, they stick to the Pentateuch, the first 5 books. But the Jews, they're incorporating prophetic books, the later stuff.
Those books that emphasize Jerusalem, the Davidic line, all that.
Exactly. Different canon, different authority, further apart. Then you've got the Maccabean Revolt, huge for Jewish history.
Yeah.
Where are the Samaritans and all that?
Good question. Fighting alongside.
Again,
Nice.
the funny thing is, Jewish sources on the Maccabees, they barely mention Samaritans. It's this intriguing silence, maybe neutrality, maybe something else entirely we just don't know.
But I'm guessing the Maccabees didn't just ignore Samaria afterwards.
Oh, nope. Late 2nd century BCE, John Hyrcanus, he's the Hasmonean ruler, he expands into Samaria. 128 BCE, boom, captures Shechem, Mount Gerizim, the whole works. Josephus, the historian, says he even trashed their temple there.
That's gotta hurt, literally and symbolically.
Devastating blow. The Jews even had a holiday scroll calling it the Day of Gerizim, like celebrating the victory. Tells you something about the relationship.
And then Romans enter the scene. Things stay complicated, I imagine.
Oh, for sure. You've got Herod the Great, for example. He's got big plans for Samaria, rebuilds the main city, renames it Sebast.
Why the interest?
Strategic spot, like we said. Plus, maybe he wanted to balance out the Jews in Judea. They were always causing a ruckus. But this doesn't erase the Jew-Samaritan bad blood.
Any specific examples of that bad blood under the Romans?
Oh yeah, Josephus, again, he mentions this incident under Governor Coponius. Samaritans sneak into the temple in Jerusalem during Passover and scatter human bones right in the holy areas.
Provocation. Much.
Major desecration. Jewish authorities say, okay, you're out, no more feasts with us. Then under Governor Cumanus, it gets violent. Samaritans attack pilgrims from Galilee. Passing through their land, people get killed. And get this, Samaritans themselves desecrate the temple another time. Not exactly neighborly.
So much for peaceful coexistence. And then the Roman Empire goes Christian. How'd that impact things?
Well, think about it. If you're a Samaritan, or a Jew for that matter, and you don't convert, the new bosses are not going to be thrilled.
They're the odd ones out now.
Exactly. Christians see Samaritans as like a heretical branch of Judaism. All the old baggage comes along. And even before a full-blown Christian empire, under Hadrian, they built a pagan temple right on Mount Gerizim.
Their holiest spot. That's gotta sting.
Outrage, backlash, suppression, the whole 9 yards. Some say Samaritan texts were destroyed around then too, either under Hadrian or Commodus later. It makes you think, how does a community survive that kind of pressure for centuries?
Must be something powerful holding them together.
Shared identity, definitely. But things don't get easier under the Christian emperors, do they?
Let me guess. More restrictions.
You got it. Theodosius II, Justinian, they lay down laws specifically targeting Samaritans, often lumped in with laws against Jews, civil rights, religious freedom, the whole shebang.
Trying to squeeze them out, basically.
Pretty much. There's revolts like the one in Sepphoris, Jews, and probably Samaritans too, fighting the Romans. Then there's a story, maybe a bit legendary, about Bishop Germanus of Neapolis. He's supposed to have gone easy on Samaritans secretly practicing circumcision.
Showing cracks in the official stance, maybe some sympathy.
Perhaps. But even holy sites become battlegrounds. Jacob's, well, the tombs of the patriarchs, Samaritans versus Christians, especially under Emperor Zeno, he ends up putting Samaritans under Christian courts, just adding to the mess.
So from pagan Romans to Christian Romans, same story, different oppressor. What happens when Islam takes over?
That's where things shift a bit. Some traditions claim Prophet Muhammad gave them protection, but history's more complicated. Good times, bad times, like with the Jews under Islam.
Up and down, depending on the ruler, I bet.
Right. Early Muslim historians, guys like Yaqubi and Masudi, they mentioned Samaritans living in Nablus and such. Funny thing is, the Crusader Chronicles, all those Europeans writing about the Holy Land, they barely mention Samaritans.
It's almost like they vanished from the Western radar for a while.
Kinda. But they're still there. And Jewish travelers in the Middle Ages, Benjamin of Tudela, Obadiah, Bertinoro, they run into Samaritan communities in Egypt even, record their practices, though often with a Jewish bias, of course. It's also during this time we see the Samaritan high priesthood decline, their leadership structure changing.
So amidst all this chaos, their beliefs must have been crucial to hanging on. What are the core tenets of Samaritanism, anyway?
Moses, he's the top dog, the prophet, the ultimate one. They even believe he existed spiritually before being born. One God, they're monotheistic, but angels are more straightforward, less complicated than later Jewish or Christian ideas. And the big one, Mount Gerizim, that's the holy place, full stop. No Jerusalem for them.
So different from mainstream Judaism.
Totally. They connect Gerizim to Abraham almost sacrificing Isaac, even Adam coming down from Eden. It's the spot.
What about their rituals, their calendar?
Passover sacrifice. Yearly on Mount Gerizim, that's the biggest deal.
Yeah.
Direct link back to ancient Israelites as they see it. They do Pentecost, tabernacles, all based on their reading of the Pentateuch, strict adherence. Marriage customs are different too, especially levirate marriage.
That's where a brother marries the widow if the husband dies childless.
Right, but for Samaritans, brother is wider, can be any dude from the same religious community, same household. Synagogue stuff is led by a priest and a shamash, kind of like a deacon. They even claim a mosque in Nablus was their synagogue once.
Wow. And their scriptures, just the Pentateuch.
Primarily, yeah. Written in Samaritan Hebrew, their own script, very old school, pre-Babylonian exile. They used Aramaic historically, later Arabic alongside Hebrew. Fun fact, Samaritan men have two names, Hebrew one from the Bible, Arabic one for every day.
So they've got Moses, Mount Gerizim. Do they have a Messiah figure too?
They do. The Tabe, he's going to set things right, be a prophet like Moses, but under Moses, important distinction. Tabe brings peace, justice, God's favor, the whole package.
Fascinating. Now, given they share roots with Judaism, then split, it's got to be a touchy subject.
Yeah.
What do Jewish texts say about them?
Talmud's a good window into that. Early on, more interaction, maybe some understanding. But as they drift apart, rabbis get more critical. Samaritans are called kutim, lion converts, implying they only adopted Israelite stuff out of fear, not real belief.
Basically not the real deal, according to them.
Right. Debates on levirate marriage, Sabbath, tons of nitpicking. But it's not all fighting. There's times they cooperate, acknowledge each other's practices. It's complex.
Tangled web, for sure. And the Samaritans themselves, they weren't just sitting around, right? They had their own intellectual stuff going on.
Absolutely. They've got the Samaritan Targum, their Aramaic translation of the Pentateuch, like the Jewish Targums. Plus, chronicles like Abul Foth, the Eller Chronicle, theological works too. And hymns, lots of them. Poet Marka is a big name there. Their script, like you said, it's a tangible link to their ancient past.
So their own language, literature, the whole package. But they also got hit with accusations over the years, right?
Oh yeah, classic stuff. Idolatry, worshiping a golden calf, golden dove, all that. Mostly from Jewish and later Christian sources, trying to discredit them.
Smear campaign, basically.
Kinda. Modern scholars, archaeologists, they mostly say it's bogus. No evidence, just polemical attacks to make the other side look bad.
So wrapping up, we've gone through thousands of years here. What are the key takeaways from the Samaritan story?
Their history is deep, going back to those northern Israelite tribes. Their beliefs, with Moses and Gerizim at the center, incredibly resilient. Relationship with Judaism, well, that's a whole other podcast. Shared heritage, but huge splits leading to conflict. And yet, despite everything, persecution, dwindling numbers, they're still here. That's testament to the power of identity.
What are the aha moments for you, the things that stand out?
For me, it's how far back they go, way before what we usually think of as ancient. Then the specifics of their beliefs, how Mount Gerizim is key to their difference. And on a bigger level, they're a case study in how religious communities work, how tradition survives, how ancient splits echo for ages.
A lot to ponder, for sure. So for our listener, leaving them with a thought to chew on.
Here's one. Samaritans. Small group, old ways. In a world that's constantly changing, what does that tell us about how identity works? How do groups keep their traditions alive when everything's pushing against them? And those old divisions, from way back when, how do they still shape us today? That's the stuff to think about. Go read up on them, primary sources, what's happening with them now. They're a living link to a past we can still learn from.
Great stuff. Thanks for the deep dive.
My pleasure.